Tragedy. What if he had been white? The case has touched off emotional debates about racial profiling of black men. But what about the other side of the coin? White privilege. Joining us now from New York is Michael Skolnik, the editor-in-chief of globalgrind.com. Michael, thank you. Do you agree that there is such a thing, and we've been hearing a lot about it now, as white privilege? Is that real?
Of course it's real, and I'm white, and I have it. I can walk in the street in New York City and put my hand out, and no taxi will pass me by. I can walk in the street, and no woman's going to grab their purse in fear of me. I can walk into a restaurant, and no one's going to ask me to pay before I eat. I can walk through my neighborhood, and no one's going to call 911 and say I look suspicious. I wore a hoodie, I wore a pair of jeans, a pair of white tennis shoes this weekend, as I do every weekend, and no one's ever going to stop and say, hey, that guy looks suspicious. And it's for one reason and one reason only, because I'm white. And Don, and further, let me say one last thing, Don. Furthermore, I have the privilege to never look suspicious. That's an incredible privilege to have. I will never look suspicious to anyone, regardless of what I'm wearing, because of my skin color.
Where did this concept of white privilege come from?
Well, I think the idea of white privilege comes from is white people have been in power for hundreds and hundreds of years. And because white people, we've been in power for hundreds and hundreds of years, we think that we have the right to do whatever we want. I look at a young man like Trayvon walking through his neighborhood, his father's neighborhood, with a bag of Skittles and a can of iced tea, and another man looks at him, regardless of his skin color, that young black men look suspicious because of the color of their skin is wrong.
Is it something that's innate? People say, well, you don't know. I've had many women say, you don't know what it's like to be a woman, Don, because you're not a woman. You don't know what it's like to be black because you're not black, or white because you're not white. Is it something that's so innate and so pervasive that people just don't even understand that there is something as the concept of white privilege and that they're in it?
Yeah, well, I wrote a piece on globalgrind.com called White People You Never Look Suspicious Like Trayvon Martin. The reason why I wrote it is because as a white person, we have to begin to understand I don't feel guilty for being white. I'm not ashamed of being white. It was the hand that I was dealt. It was the card that came out of the deck. It's what I got. But when I got that, when I was lucky enough to be a man, to be white, to be an American, I got choices to make. The choices that I'm going to make is I'm not going to be quiet. I'm not going to watch a kid get shot in the chest and just be quiet. 3 weeks ago, when Joseph Kony, when that movement started, all my white friends were loud and screaming and tweeting and Facebooking and emailing. Did you hear about Joseph Kony? When a 17-year-old black kid was killed in our country, white people were just quiet. And Don, it was you. It was you. It was Charles Blow. It was Melissa Harris Perry and MSNBC. It was black commentators who were talking about it. And I said, why did they have to talk about it? Why can't white people stand up and say, this is just as wrong?
Yeah. Well, and I'll answer that. I think it's a matter of, in all honesty, some did. I mean, because actually CBS News was the first one to do the story. But I think it is because it's diversity. There are things, if you work in, let's say you work with the economy, you work on Wall Street, things that are in reference to the economy or economics are going to stand out to you, and you're going to follow that. If you're an African American in this country and you see a story like that, it is by nature something that you're going to pay attention to. It has nothing to do with that. That is where your interest lies in some respect. If you're a woman and there is a woman issue, then you are going to be drawn to that story. It's just a diversity issue. So, I agree with you on that comment. But here's what I'd like to know. I heard a Republican commentator on another channel, I'll just be honest, it was Joe Scarborough this morning on MSNBC saying, and so the first time it really clicked with me, if you took the pictures of Trayvon Martin and you transposed them into a 17-year-old white kid, and then you transposed George Zimmerman into a 28-year-old black man that's twice the size, how would you feel about this particular story, and how would it be portrayed? And are you looking for... How would you look for guilt or innocence on the part of each side?
I hear this conversation a lot. Let's be honest. We're not going to be back here in 3 weeks talking about white kids being killed at record numbers. We're not going to be talking about white kids being stopped and frisked in New York City at record numbers. We're not going to come back to CNN and talk about white people being put in prison at record numbers. We know, if we're going to be honest with each other, if we're going to be honest about this country, if we want to walk that elephant out of the room, which is race in this country, let's be honest. And let's at least agree that young black men, young brown men, young Latino men are being targeted in every neighborhood in this country, in every community in this country. I am not going to walk through my neighborhood in Brooklyn tonight, have to worry about the police following me because I look suspicious. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So yes, if a black man killed a white kid, is it just as wrong? Of course it is. If you racially profile that white kid, of course he is. Of course it is. But that's not going to happen at the numbers that's happening with young black men.
And Michael, I have to go, but just from this conversation, people should not draw the conclusion that we're speaking of the guilt or innocence of George Zimmerman. That is a different conversation when we're weighing
Absolutely
evidence,
different
right?
conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely different conversation.
We can have these conversations.
He's innocent to proven guilty in my book, and we should have due process, and he should be arrested, and we should let it go before his peers.
And there are many white people who think the same way that you do, and I've heard from them a lot. Thank you. Thank you, Michael
Thanks,
Skolnik,
Don.
Chief Editor, Editor-in-Chief of Global Grind.